Perhaps the registrar would call the case.
Certainly, Judge. In the matter of Terence McCool and Lumber Estates Limited.
Good afternoon, Judge. Miriam Riley, instructed by Quick and Lawyer Solicitors, act on behalf of the plaintiff, and with me in the case is Shane English.
Very good. I think you better correct your name there. You appear as Shane English, Ms. Riley.
Yes, Judge. Mr. English and I are sharing a computer platform this afternoon, so I will appear on his computer and obviously with his name attached to that. So I apologise to the court for not having my own facility today.
The court will get over it. Now,
sorry, Judge. May it please the court. Jonathan Kilfeather, I appear for the defendant with Ms. Burke, instructed by Nottingham Co. Solicitors.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Ms. Riley, do you want to say a few brief words at opening?
Yes, Judge. The papers have been handed into the court, and you may have had an opportunity to see that there are 4 medical reports attached with proceedings, and Mr. Kilfeather and I have agreed that all of the medical reports may be handed in without formal proof, subject, of course, to the proof of the contents being established by you, Judge. And in terms of witnesses, we've agreed that we will call 1 witness each. I am calling the plaintiff, and Mr. Kilfeather has 1 witness for the defence, and the photographs, Judge, must be formally proved. So Mr. English will call the engineer in due course.
Thank you.
Judge, the circumstances of the accident are rather straightforward. The plaintiff is an employee of the defendant. He is a farm labourer, and he has worked as a farm labourer for approximately 20 years with the same employer. He will tell the court in his evidence that on the 14th of April in 2016, he was carrying out his duties during the day when he was specifically told by his immediate supervisor, Mr. Pat Noonan, that he required to have logs split on a semi-urgent basis, Judge, in circumstances where there was a Chagas inspection carrying out the following morning. So in those circumstances, Mr. McCool set about his task of operating a log splitter, which was attached to the back of a tractor. And while he was doing that, unfortunately, his tie became caught in the mechanism. And as a result, his arm was pulled into the machine and he suffered a crush injury to his left arm, Judge. Now, the injuries are well set out in the medical reports. There's the crushing injury, there is the fracture to the bone, lacerations to the skin, and a psychological injury that you will hear of also, Judge. So outside of that, Judge, I'll simply call Mr. McCool.
Thank you.
Mr. McCool, could you take the testament in your hand, please, and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence that I shall give to the court.
That the evidence I shall give to the court.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Terence McCool.
Terence McCool,
Thank
Judge.
you. Thank you.
Mr. McCool, could you explain to the judge what your role was with the defendant company?
I'm a labourer at the farms.
And are you still in the employment of the defendant company?
I am, yes.
I see. And on the day of the accident, can you tell the court, were you working alone or did you have somebody with you to assist you in your tasks?
Well, on the day in question, there was a lot of the lads were up in the forestry, so there was just myself and Pat Noonan were around the yard area.
Yes. And who is Pat Noonan?
She's my boss.
I see. Is Pat... Go ahead.
She's the person that sets out the jobs and tells us what to do, but we'd have our own jobs as well.
I see. And at the time that you suffered the injury to your arm, Mr. McCool, what task were you carrying out?
I was splitting the logs.
And to split the logs, how were you doing that? Were you using a machine?
I was. It's a log splitter. It's an old machine. It's at the back of a tractor.
I see. And do you know anything about the machine? What make or model it is? Do you have any of those details for the court, Mr. McCool?
I don't really. It's only that it's on the farm for years and years, and it's attached to the back of the tractor.
Yes. And to turn it on, Mr. McCool, how do you do that?
You'd have to start the tractor and make sure it's attached to the PTO shaft. And the only way you stop it then is in the tractor itself.
And when you say in the tractor itself, is it to go back into the cab and turn the key again to switch off the engine of the tractor?
That's right. Or there's a lever in the tractor you can pull to stop it, but you have to go over around into the tractor.
And is there any other knob or button that you can push or pull to stop the PPO operating?
No, there's not. No.
I see. So on the day of the accident, then, when had you been asked to carry out this log splitting task?
Well, on the day of the accident, I had a half day booked, and I had a number of jobs to do. Like I was feeding the animals, and I was repairing some fencing and everything. And Ms. McCool had given us a couple of jobs to do, but everything was taken up all morning. And but I had a half day planned because my brother was 50 that day. So we were meeting below in town with a surprise party for him. So it was only when I was coming home, I lived just beyond the yard. It was there Ms. Noonan saw me, and she told me to get in and do the logs.
At what time of the day was this, Mr. McCool?
I'd said about 2:30, 3:30. I can't be exactly sure, but it was in the afternoon anyhow, and I had the afternoon booked off.
And were you still in your overalls and your work boots when she met you at that stage of the day?
Question, Judge.
Very good,
Very
Judge.
good.
Perhaps if I were to read the question.
Would you phrase the question?
Yes, Judge. I'll be happy to do that, Judge. I accept that. Mr. McCool, what were you wearing when you met Miss Noonan as you went home from your brother's party?
Well, I was wearing my suit and tie because I had taken off the overalls that morning after I finished work, and I threw them into the laundry basket, and I was wearing my suit, and I was going home.
Mr. McCool, your injuries, can you tell the court how you say you were affected by these injuries?
Well, my hand was badly hurt from it. It was broken in a couple of places, and I had to have an operation, and I was in hospital for a week, and I was in desperate pain altogether, and I suppose I was off 6 months altogether, but I have a bad scar on my hand, and it still gives me a lot of pain.
And what do you do to deal with the pain, Mr. McCool?
Well, I take some painkillers, and I suppose the other thing is I was so upset about it. I can't go near the machines anymore. I can't even look at the log splitter now, and I get upset. And there were a lot of nights I woke through the night. I had to go to see that psychiatrist, and it was desperate.
How does this state of upset manifest itself, Mr. McCool?
Well, Judge, I tell you, I can't wear a suit and tie anymore. It upsets me. And when the machinery would start up in the yard, I just get awful stressed, and I just find as well I can't. Some of the things I used to love, like going to the races and going to bingo with my mother, I just find I don't enjoy them anymore. I just get crowds get me stressed.
There's kind of a general stress with life, and is that what afflicts you, Mr. McCool?
Yeah, Judge, I suppose it's getting better, but yeah, and there were times there. Well, there were times that I was waking a lot during the night and everything, but when they gave me that right mood medication, it helped me a good bit. I'm still taking that.
Judge, if you just allow me a few moments to take some instructions from my solicitor, please. I'll just put my camera on. I'll turn off my camera and turn off the sound just for a moment, Judge.
If you like, everyone can turn off their camera and microphone for a minute, perhaps.
I think it would be sufficient for myself, perhaps, Judge, if I just turn off my camera and my microphone for 1 moment. Thank you.
We'll wait until you return. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Just two matters that my solicitor instructs me in a timely way that I need to raise with the witness. Firstly, Mr. McCool, in relation to your evidence, when you said that Mr. Noonan arrived, or Miss Noonan arrived, and that she assisted you, where did she go to turn off the PTO?
Oh, she went into the tractor because you can't stop it from the machine itself. There's no emergency button or anything like that.
I see. And secondly then, have you got a scar that you could show the judge? I know the judge has the photographs, but it might be helpful if you wouldn't mind, Judge, if the court feels it would be of assistance, Mr. McCool will happily show his arm to the court through the camera.
Would you mind demonstrating, please, Mr. McCool? Oh, I see, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCool. If you could answer my friend's questions, please.
Mr. McCool, why would you not be able to go to the races because of this injury?
It's just that I've lost my confidence. I just find dealing with crowds, and sometimes people might bring it up when they know I was knocked out, and it just upsets me.
And did you make that complaint to any of your medical practitioners?
I can't really remember.
Well, subject to my friend correcting me, it doesn't appear in any of the medical reports that have been put in on your behalf that you have a problem either attending the races or being in crowds.
Okay, I'm just telling you what it is.
Could I suggest to you that if you had that problem, you would have told one of the medical practitioners?
Well, I'm sure I told my GP.
In terms of your job, Mr. McCool, you've worked for the defendants for 25 years. Is that the case?
That's right, yeah.
And you're not suggesting that you were not familiar with this device, are you?
The log splitter?
Yes.
I've used it a lot, yeah.
A lot. In fact, you told your engineer that you'd been using it almost since you were a child.
That's right, yeah.
You're not alleging that the log splitter was in any way defective.
But I don't. That's a matter for the engineer, isn't it?
Well, it's a matter for you, Mr. McCool. Do you say there was something wrong with the? Sorry, Miss.
Yes, sorry, that's an objection, please. Yes, Ms. Riley.
I just wish to make an interruption there, Judge. The engineer's reports are clear, Judge. The evidence of the plaintiff was that. The evidence of the plaintiff is clear, Judge, where he said there was no stop mechanism on the machine. There was nothing to stop it other than the going into the cab of the tractor and turning off the engine, and that's a matter for you, Judge. Whether you think that.
Yeah, it is.
Could I suggest that's
the fact that it appears that he might have been caused to use this machine at a stage when he was underage.
Very good, Judge. But could I suggest that that's, if the engineer wishes to give evidence that the machine is defective, that's a matter for him. But Mr. McCool, however, could I respectfully submit, I'm entitled to ask the question of him. Does he say there was something wrong with the machine?
In the circumstances that allow the question, that's right. Right, Mr. McCool, would you answer that? Did you feel there was something wrong with the machine?
Just, I suppose, once I realised I was caught, I couldn't turn it off without getting around into the tractor.
But the reason you were caught, Mr. McCool, was because you were wearing a tie, isn't that right?
I suppose it wasn't, because I was under such pressure to get the job done.
Yeah. Well, why were you under pressure?
Because there was a load of logs there, and Pat Noonan was insisting they all got done before the Tagus inspection the following morning, and I was the only one around. With that amount of logs, now
was there plenty of time, Mr. McCool, to do the job that morning before you headed off for lunch?
No, I don't remember being asked to do the morning, and I had a load of jobs to do. I was the only one in the yard. I was feeding the cows and doing the fences. And
you made a statement, Mr. McCool, to Ms. Noonan, and you said in the statement that she asked you to split the logs in the morning of the 14th of April. I was too busy to do it then, so I decided to come back to do it after lunch. Isn't that right?
Is that the thing I signed when Mr. McCool came over to my house?
Yes, I'm sure I can put it up on screen if needs be. It's the incident report form. Mr. McCool, I don't wish to embarrass you, but are you saying that you would have trouble reading that document?
I would, yeah. I left school very early, and I wouldn't know a lot of them words now. But that is my signature, all right, yeah.
That is your signature. Okay. And can I put it to you that is the statement that you dictated to Ms. Noonan?
How do you mean dictated?
You told her what had happened.
No, she was there, and she came down to my house while I was off. And
Did you have much drink taken, Mr. McCool, on the day in question?
Well, I had taken a half day, and we had gone down to the party, and I'd say I had a pint of shandy and maybe another small bit as well.
Okay. So the answer to my question then is that you did have drink taken.
That's right.
Okay. A shandy, and what's another small bit supposed to be?
I suppose maybe I had a glass. I don't think I finished it all.
A glass of what?
Another glass of shandy.
Because Ms. Newman said that she thought that after the accident, she smelled alcohol off your breath.
No, but that's all I had to drink. But when I was coming out of the pub, I banged off another fella who had a pint of Guinness, and some of that spilled on me, and maybe that's what she was smelling.
I suppose had you been wearing your overall, that might have prevented that accident. The spilling of the Guinness on your suit.
In the pub? You'd never wear your overalls in the pub.
Yeah. But you should have been wearing your overall on the day in question, shouldn't you, carrying out a task like that?
But I did wear them that morning, but you see, I was on my way home, and just Mr. McCool made me go back in and do the logs, and like I didn't put them overall back on because the laundry is generally collected at lunchtime, and I figured it was gone, and I just got into the job rather than because she just wanted me to get at it.
All right. So can I take it from that you couldn't be bothered putting your overalls on before you performed the job?
No, I didn't think they'd be there because the laundry would be gone.
And would you agree with me that had you your overalls on, this accident would not have happened?
Probably.
May it please the court.
Mr. English, how are you?
Good afternoon, Judge. As the court will be aware, the engineering reports have been agreed, Judge, and the defendant have asked if my engineer can prove formally the photographs which he took, and so I'm going to call Mr. Wall, if I may, to prove those photographs, Judge.
Very good.
Now, Mr. Wall, I think you're a consulting engineer, isn't that correct?
I am indeed.
And I think you carried out an inspection on the property in question, and you took some photographs, is that correct?
I did, on the 8th of May 2017.
And can I ask you to show to the court the photographs which you took and to prove that you took them, and you might give us some detail about each if you could.
I will indeed. I'm just about to
Judge,
share.
I wonder if I interject at this moment. I apologise to interrupt. Meg Burke, Judge, on behalf of the defendant.
Yes,
Our engineer judge has indicated, whilst I appreciate it's late in the day, but he has a concern in relation to one of the 4 photographs that I understand the plaintiff's engineer is about to share. And I attempted to contact Mr. English, but I wonder, Judge, if he could be confined to the first 3 photographs. And I'm conscious of the time. Perhaps the 4th photograph, perhaps a conversation could be had between the engineers overnight before we resume tomorrow, and nothing further perhaps might turn in it. But there is a concern, and I don't wish to undermine my own engineer. I'd be grateful if you could have that opportunity, Judge.
It's very late in the day. Mr. English, have you any thoughts on this?
Please, the court, I think it is far too late in the day for the court of application. I don't see any good reason, and there's been no reason offered as to why the 4th photograph shouldn't be admitted to evidence.
Very good. Well, I propose that, Ms. Burke, is there any reason why the 4th photograph cannot be demonstrated de bene esse and if your engineer has some difficulties with it, we can hear what those difficulties are, and I can expunge the photograph from my mind if necessary.
Very good, Judge. If that's the case, it is just labelled differently to the others, and he had a concern as to the provenance of it. And as I said, I appreciate it's late in the day, but certainly, Judge, we can deal with it in that manner.
Now, Mr. Wall, that you've heard the objection by my friend, and the judge has overruled that objection. I'd like you now to prove the 4 photographs which are in the bundle contained in your report.
Yes, what you should see on the screen in front of you is my report, and it's at page. It commences at page 43 of the electronic book, but it's then.
Yeah.
And I'm scrolling down now, and you will see then there is the first photograph.
Yes.
That's a photograph which is labelled P1, and the descriptor of it is the Massey Ferguson 96K 1490, and it's the log splitter is at the rear of this vehicle.
Yes.
And the photograph, Mr. Wall?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Can you bring us to the second photograph and explain what we're looking at? Maybe
the second,
Judge. Yep.
The second photograph then it's a side view of the rear of the tractor with the log splitter and the stop block that was for splitting the logs.
Yes.
The collar goes down as far as the joint, but the protective collar is missing from the turning part where it goes horizontal.
Okay. And now photograph number 3, please.
Again, this is a slightly from above photograph, and again that's marked P3. And the yellow plastic cover, as you can see, arrives down as far as it becomes horizontal, and then the turning part was at the rear of that, and then the log splitter then moves along here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And then number 4.
Number 4 is a picture from inside the tractor cab. And
what's that arrow pointing at?
The arrow is pointing at, to make it just visible there, is you have a red pull stop. That's to stop the tractor. There are 2 means of stopping the PTO. One is the PTO lever, which is located under the seat of the tractor to the left and to the rear. But this is the emergency stop, or the stop for the tractor, which is just disengage the engine.
And they're both inside the cabin, is that correct?
And both are inside the cabin. This is under the steering wheel. So the 2 gear levers will be between your legs, the steering wheel, the cab, and then the seat to the left of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. You might answer any questions that Ms. Burke has for you.
Ms. Burke.
Mr. Wall, just very briefly, just in relation to Mr. Spanner's concern in relation to the provenance of photograph number 4, can you just explain why it's labelled differently to the other 3?
Perhaps if you could just set out in regard to that as to what you mean it's labelled differently.
Photographs 1, 2 and 3 appear to be handwritten labels, whereas photograph number 4 contains a typed one with an underline. It seems to have been labelled differently. I'm just wondering, is it possible it was taken at a different date?
No. These would all have been, I have to admit, I give it to the girls in the office and they put the labels on them, so whoever would have put on it, it's just put on it.
You're satisfied that the 4th photograph was taken at this inspection also?
Yeah, all 4 photographs were taken at the same time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. I have no further questions, Judge.
Thank you very much, Judge. Judge, I wonder if you'd give me a moment just to consult with Miss Riley and Mr. Campbell.
By all means.
I'm very much obliged. Thank you very much, Judge. I'm just going to turn off my microphone and video so that Miss Riley can resume the seat.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, Miss Riley.
Judge, that concludes our case.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Mr. Kilfeather.
May it please the court. I have one witness, Ms. Noonan. I'll call Ms. Noonan, please.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Ms. Noonan. Could you take the testament in your hand, please, and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give to the court.
that the evidence I shall give to the court
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please state your name for the record.
Miss Pat Noonan.
Pat Noonan, Judge.
Thank you.
Ms. Noonan, I think that you were the Mr. McCool's supervisor at the material time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you remember the 14th of April 2016, the day of the accident?
Oh yes, yes. Certain parts of it will be forever etched in my mind.
I think it was a Thursday. Is that right?
I believe so.
And I think in the course of the morning, you asked Mr. McCool to carry out a particular task.
Yes, that's correct. I asked him to split logs because we had an inspection the next day, and I really wanted everything to look perfect.
And Mr. McCool maintains that he was very busy that morning and was required to work on his own. That's not the case, is it?
Judge, I object. Judge, I object to that. I'd ask my friend to rephrase it, please.
Very good. If you wouldn't mind rephrasing that.
May please the court. Ms. Noonan, who was working that morning on the farm?
I don't recall the particular individuals, but there would have been the usual amount of labourers on the farm. It was a very busy farm.
Did you have any concerns about Mr. McCool carrying out that task, Ms. Noonan?
Absolutely not. He's carried out that task any number of times. It's usually very straightforward.
And how did he respond to your request that the task be carried out?
Oh, you know yourself from his demeanour. I mean, he seemed to accept as usual. He wouldn't be the most talkative person.
And did you have much in the way of dealings with him that morning then, after that?
Not particularly in the morning. I think it was later then in the day that I met him on his way back to the farm, and I was able to draw his attention to the fact that he hadn't completed the task.
And how was he dressed when you met him?
Formally, yeah. So I think he had been at I think it was a birthday party, I'm not sure, but pretty formally they'd been at a lunch.
And how did he appear to you?
He appeared normal demeanour, normal as usual.
Did you get any smell off him?
There was a slight smell, I think, later on after the accident. I mean, when I met him before on his way back, I wasn't particularly close to him.
And the smell that you got after the accident was of what?
I smelled alcohol.
So you met him on what appeared to be his way home later that afternoon. And when did you next see him?
Oh, at the scene of the accident, when he had just had the accident with the log splitter, because I could hear the yells, so I had to run in and save him.
And what caused the accident, Ms. Noonan?
It looked to me like his tie had gotten caught in the splitter itself.
Ms. Noonan, can you give any assistance in relation to the statement made by Mr. McCool?
What do you mean?
How did that come about?
Oh, yeah. So I called over to the house. I think it was maybe a few weeks after. I can't be quite sure the date. I think he was there with his mother, and we went through what happened, and he signed the statement.
And when you say he signed the statement, how did you take the statement from him?
Well, my memory now of it wouldn't be very clear, but my memory is that we talked through his recollection of events and what happened, and I think it was therapeutic for both of us.
And can you confirm that the statement that was put on screen a few minutes ago is the typed version of the statement?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Noonan. Would you mind answering any questions that my friend or the court may have, please?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, Ms. Noonan, I have a few questions for you on behalf of the plaintiff. You've told the court about the Teagasc inspection and you wanted to have everything perfect. Isn't that what you've just said?
Yes, yeah.
And we know from your statement that you made in the aftermath of the accident, you knew it was very important to have the yard tidy. You said, I told him it was important that they be split that day and stored away, as the yard had to be empty for the Teagasc farm tour the following day. This was a very important event in your mind, isn't that correct?
Yes, certainly. I mean, regardless of what's going on, really, in reality, once things look perfect, that's the main thing.
I see. So you feel that the pile of wood that had been unsplit, sitting in the yard of a lumber estate business, would have been a problem had the Teagasc inspector seen it the following day?
I think so, yeah. Things have to be, tidied away safely.
Yes. So to achieve that doubtfully important result, you were prepared to put your long-term employee under such enormous pressure that he would go and operate a PTO in the afternoon, he having been out with his brother at his brother's party earlier that day.
Judge, I object to that question. Because...
Yeah, you're entirely right, Mr. Coolfeather.
Ms. Noonan, we've heard from the plaintiff that the only way to stop the PTO operating was to go and turn off the tractor in the cab, and it was yourself that did that. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So in this circumstance, there was no other way to stop this man being in this particular situation of great danger other than to go into the cab of an old tractor, turn it off manually. There was no emergency stop. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's as much as I knew. I'm not MacGyver. I don't know what other things people could do. I did the best that I could that day.
Ms. Noonan, this piece of machinery was wholly unfit for purpose. It didn't have a safety cut-off valve. Isn't that correct?
Well, I don't know about the valves, but in terms of being fit for purpose, I mean, I don't know if I'd agree with you there. I mean, it split the logs. It did what it was supposed to do, and you're not meant to do it with a tie and get caught.
Did you ever consider putting a second person to operate the log splitter with the operator, with Mr. McCool on the day?
No, because he had fulfilled that task himself on his own a number of times, as had other labourers on the farm, with no issue.
And would you accept, if I were to suggest to you that had a second person been with him on the day, any emergency stop that was required would have been much easier handled, and he perhaps would have been exposed to much less danger? Would you accept that?
It's hard to know. If he was still wearing the tie, I mean, that was the root of it all, wasn't it?
When you met him in the afternoon on his way back from his brother's party, he was dressed in his suit and tie. You said his Saturday suit, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And you knew full well, as you were directing him and putting him under pressure to do this job, you knew full well that he wasn't properly dressed for the task that he was required to carry out. Isn't that right?
Not at all, in that I would have assumed he would go back and change as he would normally when he comes in. I mean, he could come in the suit and tie in the mornings, but he'd still have to change for the day.
Yes, you're his supervisor, isn't that right?
Yes.
And it would have been very easy for you to check and make sure that he was properly attired before he set out to do this job.
Oh, stop. I mean, I've been reading some of these books. That's micromanaging, I think, is what they call that. I mean, I can't do everything.
On the day in question, there was only yourself and himself in the yard, he said. Everybody else was up up at the forestry.
Well, I was in the office. I was holding the fort,
Yes. And it was yourself that you were close by. You were in the Green Barn, I think you said in your statement. So you were close enough by to be able to come when you heard him shouting out. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I mean, he was bellowing, so I'd say everybody, the cows in the next field would have heard him.
Yes. You had a hip flask in your own pocket, and you administered, I think, a sup or two before he was brought away to the hospital. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'd heard for shock, that it would calm him down a bit.
Yes. And he said that he had a very big lunch. He told the court he'd had not only a lunch, but he'd had his dessert. He'd had a shandy, and he'd had a little bit more, but he hadn't finished the glass. He's a big, strong guy, isn't he? In his early 50s, I think.
Yeah, that's how you could describe him, like that.
Yes. And you had no difficulty putting him into the line of danger as he came home from his lunch, Miss Noonan. And I suggest to you that had you been less pressurising in the task, he might have carried it out with greater safety on the day.
I mean, I'd have to disagree there. I mean, you know, cutting the lawn with a lawnmower could be dangerous too if you're going to take it to that, you know, that degree. Everybody has to have a bit of common sense.
Judge, if you could just bear with me until I see if my solicitors has any further questions for me. Thank you, Judge.
By all means.
Yes, thank you. One last matter, Ms. Noonan. I understand, and the evidence from the plaintiff was that, in fact, the system for the overalls is that in the morning you put on clean overalls in the workshop, and they go, when you take them off, they go to the laundrette for cleaning, and they're back the next day fresh and clean again. Is that correct?
That's the normal operation, yes.
Yes. So, in fact, there would have been no overalls available to Mr. McCool had he gone to the workshop that afternoon to get overalls. Isn't that correct?
I mean, not necessarily. It was only halfway through the day, you know. I mean, I wouldn't know what times these things come and go at. I mean, it's definitely up to him to, you know, find some clothes or let us know if there's an issue. But like, that's a really important part of his job.
Do you provide more than one set of overalls to every employee on a daily basis, Ms. Noonan?
I couldn't be sure.
I'll leave it at that, Judge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan. Anything arising from that, Mr. Kilfeather?
Nothing arises, Judge, and it was agreed, subject to the court, that my engineering evidence would be taken tomorrow, as I understand it.
Yes. Well, if it was agreed, the court doesn't object to that. Ms. Noonan, kindly don't vanish. I have a question for you. Thank you. Ms. Noonan, are you in the habit of carrying a hip flask around with you?
I mean, not every day, but sometimes I think it could be a handy thing to have, you know. And I like to fish at the weekends, and sometimes it's cold. It's handy to have it then.
Yes, if we leave your more bucolic pursuits to one side for the moment, are you in the habit of having it while you're supposed to be working on the farm and supervising your employees?
Well, I'd have it in my handbag, and then like I have to have my handbag beside me for everything. So, you know, depends on if I have that on my shoulder.
So you had it anyway conveniently to offer medicinal succor to the unfortunate plaintiff in his hour of need. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was so lucky I had it.
By the sound of it, you gave him more of a party than he got with the roast dinner, the apple pie, and a glass and a half of shandy.
I couldn't be sure, but he just, you know, he was so loud and shouting, and I just needed to calm him down, you know.
Well, I suppose if you're being strangled slowly to death, you're inclined to voice your objection. But that's life. Thank you very much indeed, Miss. Anything arising from that?
No, Judge.
Judge.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan. Very good. That concludes the evidence for today.
Yes, Judge.
Do we need to hear the evidence of the other engineer tomorrow?
But I could see whether we could agree, perhaps, could take instructions, whether I could perhaps simply just submit his report.
Perhaps that might be the most convenient. This is a very serious matter, which I have to reserve judgment. I mean, this man, rightly or wrongly, has been left with a scar that bears a frightening resemblance to the mark of Zorro, something that he will have to bear through life, and I'm sure that will greatly disadvantage his social activities in the county of Kerry, if nowhere else. Very good. We'll leave the matter there, and I will adjourn at sine die for judgment. Thank you.
May it please the court. Thank you, Judge.
Good.